Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the finale of this multi-part discussion about the comic book Danger Club by Landry Q. Walker, Eric Jones, and Rusty Drake. This episode will feature the discussion about issues 7 and 8, including the variant issue number 8, which contains some differences from the standard version. And then Damian and I discuss the overall series briefly. So let's get right to it as Damian and I discuss issue number 7. Enjoy. Let's
dive right in.
We
see the magician on the next cover, which is another incredible coloring job. Without the color, this cover probably wouldn't have much effect. But
I think, Damian, this is my favorite cover just because of that. Just all those colors, the reds, the yellows, the cool colors on the bottom. And by cool, I mean, the blues and stuff. But just that's just a wonderful, wonderful cover. I mean, think about cover placement in a comic book shop. That having that facing you on the stand, that just pops right out. That's a wonderful construction. That's a great cover. And it just occurred to me just now, if you know your DC stories, your crisis stories, this is really reminiscent of, say, the Spectre in DC mythology, helping to recreate the universe, the DC universe in Crisis. Not quite the same thing because they do the hand thing in that, but having the magician here with his hands over the earth and bigger than life, literally, in this image, bigger than the earth itself, with the energy all around him and stuff. It's just it's very Crisis-esque,
right,
in my mind.
So I have actually purchased and downloaded all of the digital editions of Crisis on Infinite Earth. I love the artwork, but when it came out, because of my age, I had moved on as a comic book reader, and I was not, whenever I saw comic books that just had hundreds of heroes in them, which I would have loved at an earlier age, I was totally, that's for kids, I don't want to read it, which was obviously a mistake with Crisis on Infinite Earth.
See, I was the opposite. The more heroes, the better. I love that from a kid on. Just give me a series with a ton of heroes, and I'm happy. It may not be the best story, but it visually it pleased me.
By the mid '80s, what I was looking for was more Frank Miller style Daredevil and more Swamp Thing and stuff. And I was, when I saw a huge gathering of superheroes like Secret Wars and this, I just thought, this is just a gimmick to attract kids, like I once was. The very first comic book I bought because there were tons of heroes on the cover. I picked the comic that had the most superheroes on the cover.
But, see, it works. That strategy works.
As a kid, and you just get a little, or I got a little jaded about it, but it was probably a mistake with the skipping Infinite Earths. And so I'm enjoying reading it. It's a little dry compared to something like this.
Oh yeah. It's very plot driven, whereas this series has a lot more emotion at the core of it.
It's a stunning artistic feat by George Perez. It might
oh my gosh, yeah.
Ultimate. I mean, it's just mind-boggling what he does in that comic. So it's kind of dangerous to try to compare your comic book to that one. But I was just, I don't know, maybe the thinking of how much work went into the coloring of this cover. I mean, whether done by hand or digitally, either way, there's not many shortcuts in putting in all those colors in there.
There's got to be so many. I assume it's digital. I can't imagine this not being anything but digital. But how many layers and blends, and I'm quickly running out of terms to use because I don't know all that stuff. But it's just I can imagine that the complexity of the coloring job for just that cover was just enormous.
Right. It's a labor of love for sure from the colorist.
Yeah,
and not hack work or not work for hire. Okay, I'll read the front piece again. This one's a bit shorter than the others. Listen, everything you remember is wrong. 3 months. Now that's quite something to be told in issue 7 of an 8-issue series. 3 months ago, the universe was in deadly peril. Our mentors, our guardians, and our parents. They were summoned to battle a great and terrible evil. They left us in charge, and we died.
Dun, dun, dun.
But then, well, maybe you want to describe what we see next after reading that grim stuff.
Can I please? Oh, I love this so much. So you get, so in my notes I have here, and I have exclamation points after everything. 90s comics, Rob Liefeld, extreme. I mean, and look at Kid Vigilante here, jumping there, looking very Rob Liefeld-esque, and right. the big mouth and the pouches, and
yeah, there's pouches everywhere.
it's just so crazy, and what's really fun, and it even says extreme on here on this image too. Right. I just noticed. I was never big into Image Comics when it first launched, so I really missed out on reading just about everything that they did when they first launched. So I've since seen some things over the years. I've read a few things, but I was never into it. I was never a fan of it. So I kind of like you. So maybe like we talked about in the previous discussion, you got into reading comics a few years before I did. And so I think I was at the point that you just described about the time that Image hit. And so I was starting to look at the Frank Miller stuff. And, I read Dark Knight and Daredevil when it was coming out then. But, I was looking for more comics like that at about the point that Image hit with its stuff. But I can appreciate the...
Right. Image did not offer up emotional complexity or sophisticated plots. They offered up action. And if you were the right age, I think the Image age probably was, incredibly exciting.
Oh, yeah.
But neither of us were at the right age.
Nope. I missed it. But
I bought a few of the first issues. I think I stuck with Spawn for 3 or 4 issues. I stuck with Savage Dragon for a little while because that was a bit Kirby-esque, so I could kind of get into it that way. But yeah, well, I was just aware of how popular these comics were.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely I was too. And the only I did get a couple issues of Spawn when they came out, but I only got those, Damian, because they were written by Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore. Those 2 issues, one issue each that they wrote.
2 issues in when already he realized he couldn't write very well,
or somebody did. Okay. So yeah, that was just a great Image to go from what we've seen.
This artist, it's the same artist, and he even signs it in a Rob Liefeld style there. Jones.
Yeah. I love it. It's so cool.
They capture the early computerized coloring effect where
oh, you're right.
Looks awful to us.
Damian, I've lost you. I lost you right after you started talking about the 90s coloring job.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I was just saying how excited everyone was back then that you could put a gradient in a comic book. And Image and eventually the other people, glommed onto that. And we got some what now seems like awful coloring to us now. And a lot of people still hate computer coloring, I think, because of the memories of that, because I think it's gotten so much better again.
Oh, yeah. Huh. Okay, so let's move on to the issue. So this is where I was thinking. I was jumping ahead an issue, Damian. This is where the universe is reborn. We rejoin that.
Right.
So after issue 5, we come back to the universe as... Well, actually, this is just a new universe. But as we scroll through the pages, we find, oh look, this is the 90s Image-esque version of these characters.
Right. I was a little confused as to what we were supposed to make of this.
Yeah.
Is this bleeding person here? Is that the president?
That is
American Spirit.
Yeah, and yeah, he does look different. Other than the fact that he's wearing the robe and he's got, I presume, this blood. It's really dark compared to the blood that we've seen before. But he also looks a bit younger too in this. I mean,
So
there
this
are
kind of
lines right
implies that those Liefeld era heroes were actually villains and not heroes, right? Because they are all working for the evil president now.
Well, I actually, yes, because it does
That's the
say
one thing I kind of took away from that.
monsters, demons, servants of a dark force. This is what we had become. I kind of took it though too that maybe they were also being controlled to some degree.
Right.
Not
On the
necessarily
plot
that they
level,
were.
they had been rewritten by the American spirit.
Yes.
But on the meta level, they're saying that our 90s Rob Liefeld version is what the evil us looks like. I thought it was an extra jab at that period.
Ooh, we might get some letters, Damian.
There are people out there who still love Todd McFarlane, and I don't hold that against them because I love people who came at the right time for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And he has a lot of talents as an artist. Rob Liefeld, have a little more trouble.
I don't disagree with you there. We go to another scene with Magician. Again, he's in that interdimensional space outside of time. And what I wanted to point out was this splash page here where we get these 3 bubbles showing versions of these characters, which I thought was really interesting. So you have at the top, you have what I don't know how you took it, Damian, but those look more like kind of like it's Silver Age, but kind of Marvel-esque in the way I draw an equation or a line from how Robot 9 looks and the early Iron Man in Marvel Comics.
Yeah. So maybe an early 60s version.
Yeah. And then it jumps ahead to, we see the 90s versions of these characters that we just saw in the previous pages. And then it goes to the version that we have been seeing and experiencing thus far, right, which is well, I'll just say the modern age.
The 90s version of Jack Fearless is incredibly like Cyborg from the New Teen Titans.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And then I flipped back and realized, yeah, I didn't notice that. I was so distracted by pouches, but he's much in the big splash page. He's much more of a cyborg-looking character.
And Ladybug here too. Just I know we're making commentary on this, but Ladybug has basically a bikini, an ultra thin waist.
Right. You know, and the other character is basically naked with flames covering her pubic region.
Right. And then we have this other character here, the blue, light blue, or the various blues.
Yeah, I don't recall him.
Yeah. So suddenly he appears in this, and I believe the girl that you mentioned that is basically naked. So that's Fahrenheit again.
Right. I assumed she was Fahrenheit.
And there's a scene coming up where she says, "What have you done with my brother?" And so I assume that's him. So she's fire and heat, and he's, I'm assuming, cold.
Right.
Whatever his name is. But it's
clue tracking.
Yeah, it's kind of odd though that we have. I mean, Fahrenheit we've seen a little bit as we've gone through, and she's become more and more prominent in these scenes. But this guy, I don't recall, and I did flip back through the issues really quick, but I did not see him being featured in the issues so far. But suddenly he's here for some reason. It's just an oddity. I just wanted to point it out.
Right.
But it doesn't matter because he disappears basically after this, I think, until the very end.
Well, and so while the magician is looking at these bubbles showing different versions of the heroes, just to kind of skip over it, he says, "We've been unaware, blind until now. Now we can see." So now they are, whatever they have done has made at least the magician and Kid Vigilante aware of all different permutations, all the times they've been rewritten and redrawn.
And not just those two. Jack Fearless says something about this coming up that makes me think that he's also aware. So
at this point, or is there something that happens later that makes everyone aware of it?
No, I'll point it out when we get to it.
Okay.
So I think it's clear. Well, it's clear to me that Kid Vigilante. Remember when they were going down in the jet, and he's like, listen to what I have to say. I think that's when he revealed this stuff to him.
So we have the magician kind of floating around and seeing things in this space in between, and then the color changes, and we're seeing the American Spirit. I don't know. Does he have a name other than American Spirit?
He is referred to as President Williams at one point.
Oh, Williams, okay. Which is kind of like Rogers, Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
He's in his own Jesus Christ angelic pose. So the thing I wasn't clear here is this just a flashback for us, or are other characters seeing when this happened, or is this happening now? I assume it's what happened in the past.
Actually, I took it to be, this is what's happening right now.
Oh, okay. So up till this point, the American Spirit was his own entity, and this is the point at which he allows Kronos to enter his body to somehow give him immortality in exchange. Is that how you interpreted it?
Yeah, I think that's how American Spirit sees it. That is not exactly what happens, which is actually a common trope in these situations where you essentially sell your soul to a demon, where you think you're getting this one thing and you actually get another thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it is, but it's very it's not very direct in the way that it is presented here. But obviously, it's American Spirit says, "Take my mortal shell, give me immortality." So he expects something out of this. Give me eternity, he says, and that's not how I took the end result.
See, but that these later issues, it's just harder to interpret what's happening. And I thought this was happening in the 90s, basically, in an earlier incarnation, and that this was a flashback that the magician was becoming aware of. And in fact, we see kind of a version of the magician, his astral form, go into his 90s form with the jacket on. I like that detail of the jacket too. A lot of heroes had jackets back in the 90s.
That's right. No, you know what, Damian, I think you're right. I think, so what happened?
I don't know if I'm right. I'm just saying what I interpreted at the time I read it.
Well, because in issue 5, American Spirit activates that time machine, and we get the flash of white, and presumably the universe is being rewritten, reborn. We get this new version of the universe where these characters who had been fighting him now are under his thrall, or at least have some sort of allegiance to him in some fashion. We, as you pointed out, magician, his spirit does enter into his 90s version of his body, but then as we go forward, there is another change coming at the end of this issue. So I think you're right. I think this is, well, it's if it's not the past, it is a recreation of a version that has gone on before. At least that's how I see it.
It's possible by sending, because they knew this was going to happen. So now I'm rewriting it in my mind as happening now. They knew this was going to happen, so they sent the magician outside of reality so he wouldn't be affected by the changes.
Or at least being able to affect change in that reality.
So in the present, the president, Williams, has just rewritten reality to be like the 90s, to look like the 90s. And these are the versions of all the superheroes that are now under his control. But the magician, is that his name, the magician?
Yeah.
Comes from outside of reality where he's been waiting, and retakes over his remade self and turns it back into his self that has self-awareness and self-control. Mm-hmm. Because he says apocastasis, and then he says in between that, an idea that originated between moments, outside time and space, outside this broken reality, forever beyond the great evil that wants to devour us. So by going outside of reality and then coming back into his body, he's freed himself from the reality changing controls of President Williams / Kronos. Mm-hmm. So it is just at this moment that President Williams is, in the present moment of the comic book, is fulfilling his bargain, I guess, with Kronos, to let Kronos take over reality and in exchange give him immortality.
Yeah.
Which seems obvious. You let someone take over reality, they'll do whatever they want with you. So it seemed like President Williams should have figured that one out.
He's not very smart on that level, is he?
And then we see President Williams' body being transformed into Kronos, which is very cool. And again, the purples that you've talked about before, the amazing purples that Rusty is able to make work so well.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to point that out too. So when we first see American Spirit here earlier in the issue, where he's actually starting the process to bring Kronos into the universe. So we have those same purple colors, but also in the background, we have sort of greenish colors.
Right.
And so one of the shorthands of early comic books in terms of coloring for what is a villain? Well, a villain wears purple or green.
Right.
Right. So I don't know if that was intentional here. It has to be. Mm-hmm. But I love that again, that meta connection here.
Right.
But yes, you're right. The way that Jones and Drake have shown the transformation of American Spirit into this creature that we see on the pages, it's wonderfully done. Again, like you said, the purples. It's almost like a Hulk-like transformation in a way too.
Right.
Until you get this splash page here showing Kronos is here.
Right.
And he kind of looks like the Anti-Monitor a little bit too, in my mind.
You know, I've seen different versions of the Anti-Monitor, but because I'm pacing myself through the original Perez, I haven't seen Perez's version of the Anti-Monitor yet.
Well, and he has a few different looks.
So far.
He has a few different looks as the series progresses as well.
So, yeah, and eventually it's revealed, you know, he's far bigger than Godzilla. He's like a huge, literally a Titan walking around.
Yeah.
So I think on rereading it, this is all very brilliant and clever, but at the time I was disappointed because I wanted the American Spirit to be the bad guy, and replacing him with Kronos seemed to up the stakes to such a high cosmic level that in a sense I stopped caring as much, especially on my first reread. But I can see what they're doing here, and it, like you said, that it plays in with the Anti-Monitor, and it plays in with all the sort of cosmic levels above levels above levels when you start doing these multiversal things. I mean, we can see it in Grant Morrison's latest multiverse books too.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you feel as you headed towards the end of this issue?
The first time I read through it?
First time, and then now.
It was, I don't know, I kind of, not that I knew exactly what was going to happen, but it seemed, you know, the writing was on the wall from earlier issues that we would get a cosmic level thing, an event of some sort, if not, you know, an actual independent being, you know, in the form of Kronos. So I was kind of expecting something like this anyway. I didn't mind it at the time. The first time I read through it, you know, I was just happy to have the issue in my hand and be reading it again. So, but like you said, upon another read, or in my case, I've read this issue several times now, especially in the last few weeks. I just appreciate it a lot more, and I like. Well, I said earlier, you know, I like that idea of the American Spirit being the bad guy, and the whole manipulating time and how that would transform him, and I like that idea for that story. I also like this one. I like the fact that we have this, the book starts, the series starts with a cosmic, or at least implies a cosmic level event with the heroes all disappearing out in space. And then it builds up to this cosmic level event, which is a multiversal, or at least a universal, possibly a multiversal extinction level event. So I appreciate that on that level.
Right. And well, with my reread, I can see the seeds they were planting, and that this all was aiming more towards the Crisis on Infinite Earths sort of venue than I realized at first where it was going when I read it the first time. Because when you start reading a comic book, unless someone tells you this is super metafictional and stuff, you're not looking for all of the metafiction.
Right.
And maybe this is in a sense subtler than, not that it really is subtler, but in some of the ways it's constructed, subtler than kind of a Watchmen construction. Watchmen lets you know early on, this is meta, just by putting articles about the heroes and stuff and other things they did in the early issues of Watchmen. Whereas this will let you think it's one kind of comic book, and then it turns out to be a different kind of comic book.
Don't you think though,
riskier, I think, but is also very appealing and satisfying in its own way.
Don't you think though that the retro pages serve a similar function to the material that you just referenced that's in Watchmen?
Well, yeah, you're right there. I guess it's that they didn't signal that this is a story going on to cosmic levels early on. So when it reaches those cosmic levels on a first read, I felt kind of, hey, you just turned this story into something completely different than you sold me. So maybe you're right. Yeah, they do certainly signal the meta stuff by putting those old comic book pages at the beginning. But now I see the seeds planted more, and also on the meta level, I guess I see that we're not just commenting on sidekicks, we're commenting on the evolution of comics and on the big event series and the attempts to explain the universes and explain all the changes. I mean, they didn't originally reboot superheroes because they thought there were multiple universes. They just thought we need to refresh these heroes to sell to the new audience. But then people have slowly retroactively gone back to explain all these changes.
Well, just to touch on that a little bit more. So yeah, so the Silver Age began in the DC universe as these are new characters, familiar concepts, new characters, same names, and there wasn't a cosmic level event that caused that. It just right. was. But then we get to the 80s with Crisis, and I think the powers that be at DC thought, well, we can't just reboot Superman and Green Lantern and the Flash again without explaining how and why. So then they came up with Crisis, and then ever since then, that's been the template for any kind of universal change in a fictional universe in comics, and they just follow that. So
up through till the 70s began, they used to have a truism in the comic book industry, the professionals in it, that the entire audience was recycled every 3 years. So that no one who was reading 4 years ago would still be reading comic books now.
Yeah.
So you could recycle your plots, and you certainly could just reboot The Flash and not worry about people who had read The Flash 10 years ago and what they would think, and you wouldn't have to explain it to them. But by the 70s, all the people working in comics had been reading the comics in the 50s and 60s. And so they knew people still cared. Yeah. And so then by the 80s, as those people were in power, like Wolfman, they said, well, how can we explain all of this? People had started trying to explain it in the 70s. You can see it, especially in Marvel Comics, all these attempts to tie continuity together.
Well, that's so funny because I've read many articles over the years with Wolfman about the whole idea of continuity and what they were trying to accomplish with Crisis. And so they come at Crisis as a means to basically wipe out continuity, but using continuity to get into that situation in the first place. So it's right. It's a bit ironic, right?
Right. So yeah, it is quite ironic, and they keep wanting to when they did the New 52 and they announced we're wiping out, we're just starting over, I just figured, well, they're just going to start over. And then I saw there was this whole Flashpoint thing to explain why they were starting over. And I just thought just seems so silly, but it's almost a tradition now in comics. You have
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, and now currently at Marvel, it looks like Secret Wars is an attempt to explain that the Marvel universe will be slightly different and have a slightly different makeup when it's all done.
Well, to go back to your point about the recycle readers, that's not. I don't think that's happening as much.
No, it's not happening
ever did anymore
at all.
because it's us. It's people like you and me who keep buying these comics. And I don't know, how would you feel, Damian, if suddenly they did just start over and didn't explain it, and just like they did with the Flash in 1956. I mean, I guess they kind of did explain it in a way when they did that, because they did make reference to Jay Garrick Flash as being a comic book character in Barry Allen's world, but it wasn't like an event happened and suddenly there's
and then later for I think just for fun, Gardner Fox invented this idea of vibrating into other universes, and then you might as well have a Flash that was the Flash in that comic book.
But how would you feel about
even
that?
Then the writers were planting Easter eggs a little bit for just their own fun, I think. But here's even if you are young, like, I mean, on YouTube, I see new people like Millie Akers, for instance, for those of you watching on the YouTube here, who are fairly new comic book readers. But you have access to the history of comics now in a way you would not have had.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can get it digitally, you can get it in trades, you can read endless articles and watch videos and podcasts of people talking about it. Whereas back in the mid 70s, when I started reading it, I think there were 2 books about the history of comics, and that was it, period. And so if you didn't find those books, you would have no idea that there was a history or a background to things. So yes, a lot of readers are like us, who've been reading 30, 40 years, or probably 50 years. And then there are the new readers who have access to the history in a way no one ever would have in the past. So did we finish up with issue 7?
Not quite. So we're talking about a universal.
We're getting lots of these cosmic scenes.
Yes, thank you.
Now here, George Perez would have drawn like 18 times more superheroes into the scenes. But other than that, they're quite cool.
Well, I noticed too on that same page that you're showing, there's 2 panels showing the heroes getting blown back by this energy wave. And never mind. I thought they were different. I thought they looked different between the 2 panels, but I guess they are not.
That would have been cool if in each panel they looked different.
Yeah, that's what I expected, based on, especially because of that one scene with the magician and those three bubbles. Right. So that was my misreading of it. But yeah, so the magician has flown up into space. I gotta go back. He's flown up. He's talking about our world can be restored. We can go home, all of us, and we will end this. And he goes up because he keeps saying a pocket of stasis over and over, as he's keeping his friends at bay who are trying to attack him, and using the power of the blood of the gods that he got before to finally fly up, and then they get this nice explosion splash page of him just screaming out a pocket of stasis, the magic word. And then on the next page, they talk about there are three text boxes here: a pocket of stasis, ekparosis, and palagenesis. So again, we get these Greek words. And let me just
Did you look those up?
I did. I can't help myself. Let's see here. Which page is that on? No, I lost it.
Who says comics aren't for people who don't know how to do research?
That's right. Here we go. A pocket of stasis, again, that in short, that means restoration. Ekparosis means conflagration, periodic destruction of the cosmos by a great conflagration. Palingenesis is rebirth, which is what follows ekparosis. So again, we get this whole concept of a destruction and a renewal from the ashes. So it's very much the phoenix concept.
Right. And if you dug deep enough, I think just like I did, they might have even mentioned those words in the article I was looking at, that all these are things that theologians argue about and define and redefine over and over again. And this is very much a theological moment where, with the blood of the gods inside of him, the magician is able to rewrite the universe back down to its original status, the way God intended it, you might say. Sorry, I'm in a religious mood today.
No, I think you're totally right to bring that stuff up. We get the white pages again, a whole page of just white panels, but forming into until the bottom panel of Earth here.
Right.
So what new universe awaits?
So
and next issue it says rebirth.
When I read that,
okay,
all came back to me. I was thinking now we'd get back to regular Earth, all the heroes would get together, beat up the American spirit, and that would be the final issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wrong. Because I thought that this issue, in sense, was the victory, and that if there's an 8th issue, it would just be sort of the aftermath of
the wrap up.
But the authors had a slightly different idea.
Okay. Well, let's just jump right into it. So here's issue number 8. This is the normal, not the variant.
Right.
Yeah. Showing those characters. Go ahead, Damian, read that that blurb.
So we were back home. The reality that had been consumed by Kronos was restored, and with it our identities. It was the apocastasis, the rebirth of the universe. We were finally winning, but our battle was far from over. So, and we go back to a kind of Silver Age panel first page rather than a 90s first page.
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad that we're back to that. So the visual cue is that we are back to what we are familiar with so far in the series.
And I just, because I'm into the trivia of it, lo, the end is nigh, is classic Stan Lee.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is funny how I think you and I both interpreted those retro pages up to issue 6, I think it was, as DC. No, I guess issue 5, because issue 6 is when they did the came from space thing.
Right.
So we get the first half being very focused on DC Silver Age, and now we get more Marvel as part of this. Interesting choices.
Interesting thing about this is really, again, pardon me, an interesting thing about how DC became exciting in the early 80s is the migration of a bunch of sort of experienced Marvel writers came over to DC. Mm-hmm. They didn't just repeat Marvel over at DC, but they did change DC, and Marv Wolfman was kind of one of the leaders of that. They might have even, asked him to come over and make DC more like Marvel. I'm not sure. But he seemed to be the most successful writer at the time of taking some of the vibe from Marvel and reinterpreting it. He took DC very seriously, as you can see with Crisis on Infinite Earths, but giving it just that both the bigger kind of emotional thing and the flawed heroes thing more, and all of that kind of stuff. So I just think of that when suddenly we had all these heroes that just seemed to exist in a Silver Age DC world, and suddenly maybe it was the incursion of the Marvel world into the DC world. That's really stretching, but anyway, that's just a thought that occurred to me that I'm throwing out there.
I think it's a great thought. So yeah, they show the Red Vengeance, or a version of the Red Vengeance here.
Right.
No, there's still hope. Look, I love how he points off the panel, off the page, right, imploring you to turn the page.
Yes. We're wondering what the ultimate evil on the next page is that they are seeing.
Yes. And then the bonus thing at the bottom is, oh, look, Jack Fearless and Ladybug, they had a thing, apparently, which is interesting.
The endless secret of these sworn enemies. Almost looks like an Archie Comics picture. But
yeah, you're right. It does. It does. It has an Archie vibe to it with
their turned up noses and. Anyway, yeah, and so Who is in the background? There's some weird-looking hero behind the Red Vengeance. Do we know who he is? We know that she's the magician hero, but
right. I don't recall seeing this character before, but he might have appeared in a background or something. He's definitely has
Kirby Crackle in the background.
Oh yeah, tons of Kirby Crackle. I think we same thing with the issue where the gods are. There's Kirby Crackle everywhere there. So right. Yeah, very Marvel-esque. So yeah, we get going into the issue. We get Kronos, the Titan, on Earth. Look how big he is. There's a little ship. Well, it's not little. There's a ship on the sea, and look how small it is compared to him. And notice there's on the previous, right there, right there. There's a panel showing him entering the world. I just like the construction of that, where it's just this crackle of kind of circular energy up in the sky, and Kronos's arm and a little bit of his head is coming through that portal. So I really like the way that they did that.
So here I was a bit confused. We got these caption boxes in different colors, like when we were with the Greek gods. Are those the voices of the Greek gods again?
Yes.
Okay. So I wasn't, does that mean the Greek gods are reborn too? Because we never physically see them, I don't think.
No, we don't. That is coming up.
Oh, is it explained later?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, one more thing about that panel showing the splash page showing Kronos entering our world. Mm-hmm. If you look at the bottom, you get some splashes of color here, kind of like the water is splashing onto the border, the page.
Right.
So it's bleeding into the real world in a way, I guess. It's just a nice little touch again.
Right, and he is coming from outside this world at the top of the panel.
Right. Yeah, just I don't know who thought of that, but it's wonderfully done. Yeah, I mentioned before Fahrenheit asking, wondering where her brother is. So there's Fahrenheit there going after Kronos. You son of a bitch, where's my brother? Well, I don't know what happened to that character. I don't think we ever see him again after what happened in the previous issue. Ladybug is I'm gonna speed through some of this, Damian. So jump in if you need to. Fahrenheit apparently gets blasted away out of existence here, so she's joined her brother in non-existence. Ladybug is taking control of President Williams' ship and fires all these missiles. That doesn't do anything. And then here we get back to the Omphalos Stone, which I have notes on here too. I think I actually had that on the previous.
Oh, and this brings us back to I had thought Ladybug was dead, and obviously she's alive now.
Yeah. Jack Fearless finds the Omphalos Stone in that globe that we talked about earlier. So he says, should have known. You never change, do you, Joe? And then he crushes that globe and pulls out the Omphalos Stone. So the Omphalos Stone, I'm gonna have to go over my memory here because I can't find my notes. The Omphalos Stone actually is something from Greek mythology. It is what Zeus's mother wrapped up in swaddling clothes and gave to Kronos before Kronos swallowed Zeus whole. That's what saved Zeus, is his mother doing that. Stone. Yeah. So the stone has power within the Greek mythology because of that association. And I need to find my notes here about that. But anyway,
so the president always had the Omphalos Stone inside of his helicarrier, basically.
Yes. Yep, I'm not finding it, so I'm gonna move on. What's the good notes if I can't actually use them? In the meantime, Magician has gone back to Kid Vigilante's abandoned mansion, and remember how we talked about, Damian, last time, where I wondered if when Kid Vigilante pulled that USB stick or whatever it was out of that console, and then the lights went out, and there was the heartbeat, and I thought maybe that he killed Kid Victory.
Right.
Well, I'm not so sure of that now because we have a panel showing
Right.
Magician going into there, and there's Kid Victory in the stasis tube, and there's, I mean, there it appears to be powered.
Right. The
So
body has not rotted or anything.
yeah, exactly. So
Uh,
apparently he's still alive.
Retroactively, I'm thinking the idea might have been that they erased his brain rather than stopped his heart.
Ooh. So instead of a heartbeat, that was a.
Out. They had to pull the information out. They had to drain in his brain of.
You're right. That makes a lot more sense.
He had the kind of brain that the Red Vengeance had planned on all along, and Kid Vigilante didn't.
Oh, you know what? Speaking of that, I forgot to bring this up when we were talking about it before. So they talked about how Kid Victory basically was brain, or basically dead. He's on life support. But Kid Vigilante was telling Ladybug this in an earlier issue about how it wasn't some superpower or superpowered being or some fight with a supervillain or anything. It was basically a brain tumor. Right. So did Red Vengeance in his machinations, his cloning, is that what caused that brain tumor? Did Red Vengeance actually kill?
Brain, the side effect might have been a tumor.
Yeah. So he inadvertently possibly ruined his own plan. Then we get a scene with Yoshimi again. She has the Gigantobots, and what again? I've talked about how much I love this character and her attitude and her bravado. She says, "Attention, President Williams. You are a war criminal and a madman. You subjugated my people. You enslaved them. You took away their honor and you turned them into your toys. In the name of my father and of my grandfather, and in the name of my friends who you have tortured and killed, I sentence you to death." And then she unleashes the full force of the Gigantobots against Kronos in this wonderful page here. Lots of explosions, lots of explodey bits.
And I'd almost forgotten she's in control of all those robots with remote controls, bitches.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have to keep following all the details. They're not going to remind you of them. But yeah, so that is a wonderfully drawn or colored scene again.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of good fireworks in these last two issues.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Magician puts that USB stick back into the console and it's uploading. So I think what you were saying is absolutely correct. Only now what's different? We'll find that out. So the attack on Kronos does not work, and we get a bit of cursing from Yoshimi. And look at her face, Damian. She looks so defeated in that panel.
Not crying blood like everyone else always.
Yeah, thankfully, but
yeah, no, she's very she thought this would change everything, and it has no effect.
No effect whatsoever. Yeah, and she's just so defeated here. It's again, I keep saying this, but it's heartbreaking to watch this. So again, kudos to the artist for showing this wonderful emotion. And then it doesn't stop. On the next page, you get Ladybug here realizing that Jack is about to die or is dying, and she's crying, distraught over the situation. Magician starts, and this is important here. He starts his mantra of saying apokatastasis. He does it on this page twice.
Right.
And then on the third time is when something happens. He busts open the stasis tube because he's trying to get Kid Victory to wake up.
Right.
But in the dialogue, the way he's actually talking to Kid Vigilante or talking about Kid Vigilante. So I think at this point, did you figure out what was going to happen, at least with Kid Vigilante and Kid Victory here?
I thought that they would put the mind of Kid Vigilante into Kid Victory. There's a whole bunch of stuff about the gods saying, "Our power, you're stealing our power. You can't do this. Can't, please."
Yeah,
they're using the power of the gods.
Yeah.
In some way.
So yeah, earlier on in the issue, they feel betrayed by Kid Vigilante. So again, you have almost in in a similar fashion, you make a deal with the devil, and then you don't get what you bargained for, and then
Kid Vigilante's the devil.
In this case, yes, yeah. So I'm not sure exactly what the gods thought they were getting into, but they feel trapped, and
Right.
they're talking about this in the scenes in which the magician is with Kid Victory. So that will come into play in a second. Let's see here. Kronos has now fully transformed himself into what we saw earlier,
right,
with Kid Vigilante and Red Vengeance.
Ago, we saw Kronos that way. Yeah.
So another great splash page there of Kronos. I thought that was really cool.
Right. So Kronos is ever more unstoppable.
And then we get a flashback here with Kid Vigilante and Apollo and the gods. Now we actually see them fully and in their colors, which is a nice panel. And this is when Kid Vigilante convinces Apollo to join him in this fight, to rise up and face this nightmare as a hero. And he does. Apollo does agree. Even though his brothers and sisters are going, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want to lose our power. We don't want to do this stuff.
Right.
But he convinces them.
Is their power being used to revive Kid Vigilante? Or is it being used to go into that Follow Stone or something?
I will say no to that last question. But I was confused about that. When we get to that point, I want to talk about that too.
So, in other words, is their power needed to defeat Kronos, or is their power just needed to bring Kid Vigilante back to life?
I would say both. I think it's both in this case.
You can see that I was kind of confused.
Well, I was too, because when I was rereading this issue, I had to read this scene 2 or 3 times before I felt I fully comprehended exactly what was intended, or at least my understanding of the events of these last few pages. The transfer is complete, and Apollo is saying we have no choice. We must join him. And that's when Kid Victory's eyes open. He's glowing with that golden power, and he is transformed. And he goes off. Notice, Damian, in the bottom panels here with the magician, there's that colorful halo or effect, or I'm not sure exactly what that is. And then he's looking at his hands and just staring at his hands for a moment.
That's kind of cool, but I don't know why.
Yes, and I want to touch on that when we get to the alternate issue, because I took it a certain way. However, what I took from this issue, from this presentation, was that his power was gone, his magic was gone. I thought maybe somehow his magic got taken by what the event that just occurred. And so he's just looking at his hands going,
right,
it's gone. I don't have power anymore.
Right.
In the meantime, Jack has taken control of Skybase 1. He's transported Ladybug and any remaining survivors off the ship, and he's building up ramming speed, or at least some equivalent of that.
And so, in this panel at the bottom, is that Kid Eternity or Kid
Victory?
Kid Victory / Kid Vigilante shooting up into the sky out of the mansion?
Yes, that's how I took it.
That I didn't connect up very well.
Well, and it's hard. It's hard because you have, and the panel above it, you have the ship in a very similar fashion, streaming towards Kronos, and then you get that panel there with Kid Victory coming out of the mansion. I mean, it's clearly the mansion that it's coming out of, but it's very similar in construction. So it can be confusing.
I would argue, given that they kind of stretched this part of the story out, that they did a poor job of giving you enough focused clues as to what, where, and how, or what, where, and why. Well, the whys, what, where, and how we're seeing at times it takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. But again, that's one of the things I loved about this book, is that we weren't fed this
led by
stuff.
the hand, but I think you could
Yeah.
do a little more without completely leading us by the hand to make these last sequences work a little better.
You're right. I would be really interested to know, if someone is reading this for the first time, how they interpreted these things that we are talking about, where we were confused. Were we confused because of the baggage that we bring? The history of our own experiences reading these kinds of stories, because we're expecting one thing and we get another? Or is it just unclear because of the construction of what's on the page? It's
Right.
the artist not doing a clear enough job. What is it? How are people interpreting these things in comparison to how we are doing it? I would really love to hear that.
And also, given at least my first reading, was spread out over 3 years.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. So we have that in play as well, because we have that long break between the first half and essentially the last quarter, third, whatever, of the series, and how that plays with our memories of what happened, and going into this, like you said, for the reading it for the first time. Yeah, there's a lot to play with here in terms of how we interpret the events of this series.
So my interpretation, which I'm only now doubting, was that whatever kid magician, or whatever the magician and kid vigilante did, transferred into this stone. But now I'm not sure if I'm right at all about that.
And I agree. I took it that way too at first, but then on the reread, it doesn't appear that they are connected at all, other than this is the power of the gods in play. So the Omphalos stone has a lot of power. That's the stone that Zeus was holding in issue 5, I think it was, fighting off Kronos in that scene, in that retro page scene. So it has a lot of power to affect even Kronos. And then you have, as you see in that bottom page where you were just showing, you have all this, the colors of the gods.
Those streaking lights, which are the gods, but I didn't realize that till just now. I didn't know what I was seeing before.
Yeah.
So I thought we were just seeing the helicarrier with this Omphalos stone going at ramming speed towards Kronos.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking we're seeing both the helicarrier and all these lights that are the gods, plus Kid Victory, shooting towards Kronos. And here we see it more explicitly what they look like.
Right.
So I should have put it together better, but I was so stuck in my thinking that the Omphalos stone had the god's powers and was what was going to destroy Kronos.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I guess the Omphalos powered helicarrier rams Kronos, but then he's still alive. Although he's saying, no, we are too strong for this, no. And then streaking in come the vestigial gods, or whatever's left of the Greek gods. And then they kind of ram into him also.
And that is the killing blow.
And that's the killing blow, I guess. But it's not like, even the way it's drawn, we don't see them shooting straight into him. We just kind of see an explosion of color and lightning.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know when they struck him. Did they strike him in this panel?
Yes. So they come, it looks to me like they come from behind him and go through his chest.
Right.
And out through the front.
So for all the brilliance of the artwork throughout, I think this is mismanaged. And I think we need a dead-on shot where you see that they shoot right through his chest, and you see it in a very visceral way, so that you're just absolutely sure what happened, because there's just not enough other clues and there's no explanation.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And then I guess because he's been pierced by these gods, then he explodes. His power is unleashed. Right. It's no longer contained within the form.
Right.
And then you have Kid Vigilante, Kid Victory, whatever you want to call him. It's Kid Vigilante in his clone brother's body.
So we assume.
Yeah, I certainly do.
We're never told that is Kid Vigilante, are we?
Well, true. But if you look at the panel, his colors are opposite of what Kid Vigilante has been shown.
Oh, really?
So,
So his
so the
costume is Kid.
victories, yeah.
But how do we know that that's Kid Victory's brain, not Kid Victory's brain in there?
Well, it's true. You have a point. Maybe
literally Kid Victory's brain, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
physical
that's true.
brain.
Yeah, I did take it that Kid Vigilante's mind was uploaded into Kid Victory's body, and the power of the gods was able to restore him and defeat Kronos here. And then on the next page, you have so the power is unleashed, and then you have these panels showing the characters who are bruised and bloodied, maybe dying, and they're being reborn, restored. So we get back to the apocatastasis again.
A brief sense of this color washing across the earth, and it goes from the dark. This also confused me because normally you read from right to left, but the dark side is on the left, so the renewed side is on the right of the page. So you normally, left to right. So yes. The new side is on the left side of the page, and the dark side, which I assume is the old side, is on the right.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I feel like another panel or two there could have made that scene a little better.
And then we get the ending of the series here, last 3 pages. They talk about restoration, and the heroes are back. The adult heroes are back.
And I'm not instantly so excited by that because I didn't feel like the adult heroes treated the teen heroes that well. Well, now the good version of them, not distorted by the will of the American.
Well, I don't know about that. When we get to this next panel I want to talk about. But to be fair, the only real interaction we've seen with an older hero and a teen sidekick has been with Red Vengeance and Kid Vigilante, and that's not exactly a wholesome relationship.
I guess I form my own sort of feeling about the book being about abused children. But.
Yeah. So yeah, here's the scene. So yeah, we clearly see here in this panel Kid Victory's suit, the red with the blue accents instead of the blue with the red accents, which is Vigilante's costume. The adult heroes fly down. It's a really cute scene where some of the teen sidekicks are running towards their mentors, their parents, whatever. Right. There's some hugging going on in the background, and then there's this panel here of Andrew, or Vigilante Victory, whatever, looking at his father. He's got blood coming out of his eye. He just says "Father," and Red Vengeance comes up to him and says, "Acceptable," and walks off. And then look at the Kid Vigilante's face. Now he's crying blood out of both eyes.
I know. I don't know what that's supposed to be.
Oh, it's just. Again, I say Red Vengeance is such a dick.
Red Vengeance, I assume, thinks it's Kid Victory, or does he know it's Kid Vigilante inside there? I guess he knows because it was all his plan in the first place.
Yeah. So I guess good job, son. You didn't screw it up too badly.
Acceptable.
What a dick. Anyway, so then finally we get the final page of the series. The magician returns home.
So he has not lost his power, or his power has been restored to him.
Yeah. So I think I just took that, I interpreted that incorrectly when I first read it. And when we talk about the differences here in a minute between the two number 8 issues, I'll tell you what I was thinking. But yeah, so he obviously has his power. He's returned home. He says, we can finally take off our masks, but we can never be children again. So here's this great ending to this journey that these kids have been on, being put in a situation where they had to grow up to some degree, and in a sense take over the roles and responsibilities that their mentors and parents had. And you get the added benefit of, from a storytelling standpoint, this series opened up, not counting the retro page, but the series opened up with the magician leaving home.
Oh,
and now he returns home.
And there's the same pictures on the wall that he walked past in issue 1.
Yeah. So a great circular ending to the story. I loved that.
but you come home, but you're not the same person. And we've all experienced that, right? I think we've all experienced coming home and everything seems the same, but you're not the same anymore.
Right. What was that? The Tom Wolfe that said you can never go home again, or
Right.
or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And also we have he's taking off his mask. He's hidden his identity from his parents.
Mm-hmm. His mother especially.
Going
Yeah.
to be discussing his identity with his parents now.
Yeah. And so to go back to something that happened in a previous issue in the first volume, when he leaves that voicemail, did his mom actually get it?
Right. And does she listen to it? Because he says she never actually listens to her voicemails.
Right. Anyway, so what did you think of this ending to Danger Club? The normal version or the non-variant version?
I thought it was a mostly good version. I do feel frustrated where there's a climax and there's a little unclarity to me. Like that's a point in a comic book or any kind of story. At the climax, I want to be clear what happened. And so it taints an overall brilliant book to me a little bit, that the ending has these points where I have to struggle to decide what happened.
Okay.
It's one thing to sort of put together clues, but somehow I feel like the big denouement, or whatever the proper term is, should be crystal clear to me. And I think they missed a number of opportunities visual to do that.
I would agree with that.
Maybe I'm too much of a barbarian. I would have crashed the helicarrier right into Kronos's mouth, and I would have shown the light of the gods bursting out of Kronos's chest rather than these more subtle images they gave us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I will disagree. I like how some of the ending was not as crystal clear, just because that conforms to what we have been shown so far in the series, where like you said before, our hands are not always being held in this series. So I like that. I like that quality.
I definitely like a lot that Red Vengeance just says acceptable. I'm not sure what to make about the bleeding out of the eyes at the end.
Yeah, that was weird to me too.
Yeah. It just maybe again reinforced my sense that there's an undercurrent of a sense of child abuse about the relationships.
Okay, now we definitely have to somehow get together with Walker and Jones and Drake and find out if that was any part of what they were thinking.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely like that ending with the magician and all of that. And I do, with this repeated reading, I appreciate that they had to go cosmic at the end because of what they were aiming to, do on the metafictional level and everything.
Okay, shall we? Let's talk about the variant ending, the alternate ending. Let's just talk about the differences between the two books instead of going over it as in any kind of whole fashion. Right. So you want to talk about the cover?
Well, at first glance, you look at the cover and you think, oh, it's just colored in a different shade. But then you look closer and there's all these dots, which are like what they used to call Ben-Day dots that artists used to have to glue onto the surface of paper to get shades of gray.
Thank you for bringing that up. I had that in my notes too.
And the background is different. It's, instead of a storm, it's kind of this gray cloud. And even for some reason, there's a bit of a difference in the cloud down at the bottom corner. I'm not sure why I noticed that or whether it matters, but
you know what Damian,
it blots out the signature of the colorist.
You're right, it does. Hey, on your copy, I just noticed this. You're right. The cloud is different to me too, but on mine it says Todd Rules.
Oh, you're right.
Is that what it says on yours? Okay, so it's not just somebody who had written on my copy before I bought it. So is that Todd McFarlane? Are they making some sort of reference there?
I don't know. I don't see why they would, but I thought maybe it was a different colorist, but since the name of the colorist has disappeared, but they don't mention in the credits a different colorist. Todd rules, huh? And the whole effect, like if you look, like I'm looking at her face, Yoshimi's face at the bottom versus this Yoshimi's face, it just looks so different with the difference in coloring.
Yeah, definitely darker.
It has a almost I don't know, almost a different emotional quality without the shading of the coloring.
And notice too, the cover has wrinkles on it
And scratches.
and scratches and tears. You pointed that out. So we talk about the meta qualities of this book. That's very meta right there. But yeah, I'm glad you pointed out the Ben-Day dots, the coloring. It's definitely flatter, less vibrant than what we got in the normal issue. So that does play through the rest of this book, the rest of this variant book.
Oh, interesting. See, so I've just read this once and not the whole book. I've just sort of searched for when I thought the pages became different and just read the last four or five pages, or three or four pages.
All right.
So you have a better view on this because you more thoroughly went through and read this version, which I'll be doing later this afternoon.
So as I said earlier, besides the cover, really the only differences start on page 16. And that is the page where the gods are shown that I pointed out earlier.
Pretty important page, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's not the page.
Oh.
That is definitely one of the pages, but that's not the page.
It's not the first page of a difference.
Oh, wait. See, Damian, I wish comics would bring back page numbers on the pages.
That would be nice. I love it when you see credits that so-and-so inked page 18 through 19, and then you don't know which page that is.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm sorry. This is
cared. You'd have to spend a lot of time counting the pages.
This is the page. I was right the first time. This is the page. So the differences here in I'm going to call this 8A for the original, the normal version, and 8B is the variant. So in 8A, Kid Vigilante says, we don't have time for this when he's talking to Apollo. And in 8B, in the variant, he says, that's not true. So Apollo had just said, this is a trick, another trick to hurt me.
Right.
And so it goes from, we don't have time for this to, that's not true. So already we're seeing we're seeing a softer presentation to Kid Vigilante than what was before. Right. In the next panel, the difference is Apollo says, you're not giving me his choice, to what Kid Vigilante says.
Right.
In 8B, he doesn't say anything.
Right.
There are no
because
words.
He does indeed know what the truth is. And
it dawns on him much quicker in this second version. In panel 3, in 8A, here, hold on, I only jotted down little bits on the page, but on my paper, but I want to make sure I get the full dialogue here.
In the original version, he's talking about the choice some more.
Yeah, you have a choice, the same choice your father had, the same choice any of us have. You can die as Kronos erases all reality, or you can die fighting the creature that destroyed your home. In 8B, he says, your power, the power of the Olympians. I've done everything I can to get us to this point, but I can't see past this moment. That is an incredible shift in the momentum of this book, the plot of this book.
Right. We assume in the original that he still is following his knowledge of the future.
And everything hinges on his plan, his actions. Suddenly that shifts to Apollo.
Right.
And so join me, Vigilante says, and you will face this nightmare a hero. That's the original. And in the variant, join me and we will face this nightmare together. In the next panel, Apollos, you're asking me, my brothers and sisters, you are asking us to die forever. That's the original. And then it goes to, you are asking us to die. So those are the differences on that page.
I'm not sure why they took the forever out, but maybe just to make it seem less extreme.
Well, and don't you think perhaps that if that forever had not been in there, that it would perhaps be less confusing when they show up in their energy forms later?
Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, that's a very subtle thing. It's one word in a dialogue box, but again, just that shift in tone with Vigilante towards Apollo,
Right.
and him saying we have to do this together. I can't do everything. I don't know everything. I thought that was incredible. On the next page, page 17, let's see here. Sorry, I got my two books here.
Did they signal this? Because in my cursory view of hearing about the different issues online, I just heard there's some different final pages.
That's pretty much all that they talked about. I want to get into that once we get through this. There are some specific things that Walker and Jones talk about regarding that, though. Let's see here. So, this is Apollo addressing his brothers and sisters. He says in the first one, "We have no choice. We must join him." And then the second one, it says, "Brother, I will join you." This is one of the gods talking to Apollo. So a difference there. On the next page, 18, this is where Victory and Vigilante come alive. Again, these are the gods talking. We must all join him. And instead, in the second one, it says, "We will all join you." So instead of this being this is something that we have to do, it becomes, this is something that we choose to do.
Right.
And okay, so here, Damian, this is where I mentioned earlier, where a magician is looking at his hands. So if you compare the two, that energy signature at the bottom.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of washing over him. So he sees it. Right. So this is how I took it. In the first issue, we don't see it, but he does. In the second issue, we get to see what he's seeing. So it makes a lot more sense here. So that restorative energy.
On the original, it looked like the power was gone because you don't see anything.
But here is the restorative energy. And in the panel where you see that, there are those dots again.
Oh, you're right. Band-Aid dots around his mask.
Yes. So that effect is already starting right here. So what we saw on the cover is now we see it for the first time within the story.
These changes emphasize again the importance of the colorist in this project.
Exactly.
You have to do the colors a certain way. It's not like just anybody could just come in and color things.
And now I'm going to jump ahead to page 24. This is after Kronos is defeated, and we talked about how the characters are getting restored. Their injuries are being healed. And not only are they healed, but if you look at the differences, see if I can do this one-handed. So in the original, you could see Yoshimi here in the panel where it's very clear, the blood's disappeared, she's healed. But in the second version, it's the same thing, but notice the shift in the art style.
They're in the flat colors. They've got the bende.
Exactly.
And the magician has a hat and a bow tie.
Right. So he's physically transformed here beyond any kind of healing. And notice, so in the original, he says a pocket of stasis, and the dialogue box is up above him. It's clear he's talking. And the second one that we see, he's whispering it. Yeah.
And they move the position of it, I assume mostly so you'd be sure to see the hat.
Yeah, not as to exactly, not to cover up the hat. Then
the Bright New World is a new world of flat colors, and basically the flat colors of an older comic.
Yep, exactly.
Although a bit underplayed because they're kind of pastel, but in any case, more like an old comic. And the sky, the clouds in the sky are very simply drawn.
With those dark outlines, yeah.
Right.
In my notes, I say the restoration is more Silver Agey.
Right.
And then, okay, so here's a major difference on page 25, that next page, Damian, all the text is different. Everything here is
Right.
different.
I noticed that.
So in the original, there are just two text boxes. It says, and from that flame, rebirth. But in the variant, it says, from that flame, the life force of creation itself. Every soul Kronos had consumed, every world that had perished to feed his insatiable hunger. Everything that had been taken from us, everything we had been, all of it released. The multiverse itself reborn before us. It had all come back. Boy, talk about hitting us over the head.
So that's different. There we get the return of the multiverse, the undoing of Crisis, which we do not get in the original version or the A version, where it's still just one world that's restored.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's all worlds are restored.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next page is, even an idiot like me can see that we're looking at a different comic book. It's both drawn and colored differently, and it's very mock Silver Age in the B version.
Yeah. And notice too, I like the construction of this. One, you have different characters being shown, and you have in the variant, you have Insectra, a villain, being shown coming back. Who, we only saw her in one panel in like issue 2 or 3.
Good memory that
in the retro page. And notice how the characters here, I'll show this, the original. Notice how we are, from our perspective, reading this, we're looking up at them. We have the way that they're positioned makes us look up towards them. Right. In the variant version, it's less so, and more we're more on a equal level with
like
them.
We're flying with them among the clouds.
A little bit. So definitely a tonal shift there in the presentation. Not just obviously the way it's colored and everything, but the way that people are positioned.
I wonder if you did an analysis of modern comics versus Silver Age comics, if you'd find in general that the Silver Age comics made you feel more like an equal, and the modern comics have more of an awareness of the godlike superiority of superheroes over regular people.
I think there's some credence to that thought, Damian. Yeah. One other change on that splash page in the original, that first text box says, after months of darkness and pain and suffering, and then the rest of it's the same, but in the variant, it's the first box is different a little bit. It says, after months of death and months of death and pain and suffering instead of darkness and pain and suffering. So one word difference.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that difference.
That's kind of an odd. But death is.
I want to emphasize that everything's brought back rather than just things from one world.
Yeah, and death is, I think, a more concrete concept to us than just darkness. So perhaps they wanted to go with that.
And then we have a lot change in the next page, including the coloring and many of the panels redrawn.
Yes. So a lot of the text has changed after so much darkness instead of death. In the second one, the light was returning to our world, whereas where that text box is, there's no text box in the original. Instead of saying Father, he says Dad, and notice his eye. He's not bleeding. It's actually a tear. Right. And then, of course, you get Red Vengeance and drawn very Silver Agey. Mm-hmm. Good job, son.
Good job, son, instead of acceptable.
And shaking his hand. And that's when the restorative energy transforms Kid Vigilante into his Silver Age self. And he's smiling.
And he says, Holy Robin.
Right. Oh my God, Damian, I didn't even notice that.
And you are Robin, practically.
I know. Jeez.
Seen the picture.
That is awesome.
Some of you may have seen a picture that Eric tweeted out of himself as Robin at a con.
Yeah. We can just skip over that.
Okay, sorry. We could finally be heroes again. So instead of ending with him bleeding from the eyes, he's smiling and saying we can finally be heroes again.
Right. And then instead of the ending that we talked about in the original, in this one, There is no. This is the one thing I don't like about it in terms of the story itself. We don't get the cyclical closing of the magician, but instead
Right.
we get a panel that says we could live, and then we get the planet Earth, and we pan out and we see all of the multiverse Earths out
Right.
there. So it is restored. Finally, everyone would live. Everyone, including everyone on the multiverse.
And in the final panel of the original version, we see Earth by itself floating in space.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, I'm glad you pointed that out.
Earth versus the ever spiraling outward and outward endless versions of Earth.
Yes.
And so the first ending is an ending that seems artistically satisfying to me as an adult. And this is the ending I really want.
Okay, let's talk about that. Why?
My
Why
inner love of comics, I want everything to be never ending, and pish posh to this life circles back on itself, and we're older now and we can never go back to being children. I want to go back to being children. I want that joy over and over and over, and over endless iterations.
Oh my gosh, you're absolutely correct. I agree with what you just said. 100%. I was going to say the same thing, so I'm not even gonna repeat that. So
sorry for stealing.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad we were on the same page about the ending, about the two endings. So, okay, we have been talking for quite a while, but Damian, okay, let's talk about this in general terms. And we've touched on some of these things already, but I have a couple of questions for you. One is, what about this book kept us around for the 3 years that it took for it to come out, to finally end?
Well, I just didn't know. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, and I wanted to know. It's not like some stories you read and, yeah, okay, you can just put it down in the middle because you pretty much know how it's going to go anyway. They surprised me with each issue, particularly like the first 5 issues, so that I felt, my God, what can they be doing? What can they be up to? What can happen next? Starting with the first issue where we get this rapid descent into brutality, and then the second issue where we see our hero killed in the first page, basically. They just did a really good job of keeping me going that way. Mm-hmm. I think the experience would be totally different read, for the first time as a trade or something. But that's what kept me awaiting new issues. I couldn't figure out what they were up to and what they were going to do next. Mm-hmm. How about you? Does that line up with you, or was there some other thing that drew you onwards and kept you a true believer over 3 years?
Well, that, and of course, as we've talked about in the previous discussion, it is anything that is a story about teen sidekicks. Mm-hmm. You pretty much got me right there. So to go into this just predisposed to wanting to read the story, and then reading those first 4 issues that came out and finding out how much love they were putting into, or at least the way I was interpreting it, there had to be love in this comic because of the way that they were giving it to us. The retro pages, the examination of the teen heroes instead of the adult heroes in this situation. The brutality even of it is just so different from mainstream big 2 superhero tales. They were pushing some boundaries. There was some metafictional elements to it even early on that I absolutely fell in love with. So that's what kept me going.
I would say there's secondarily, there's kind of now that we've talked about it so much and we talked about the background of the team who created it, there was a real synchronicity in what they're all doing together. And even though I couldn't have put that into words before doing this big long podcast and rereading it and everything, I think I sensed that from the beginning, which again compelled me to want to see what they were going to do next, because they were doing things at what felt like they were deeper in the groove or whatever than your average comic book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Making all their little elements work, which I felt did personally fell apart a little bit in that last issue, where I lost track of things a little too much for my taste. But other than that, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to try and be apologetic for the artist, because even though I agree with you, there are some parts of it that could have been a little more clear in construction.
Mm-hmm.
I still think the job that they did in those pages is just phenomenal, and quite frankly, a lot better than a lot of the superhero stuff that I read from DC and Marvel.
True. Maybe I was just spoiled by the other 7 issues. And
well, it can't be perfect, right?
Now that we've gone over so thoroughly the alternate issue, that gives it a new level, gives the ending a new level of metafictional excitement to me that kind of made up for all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I kind of feel a shame hearing that alternate stuff is not in the trade.
Yeah.
I think they should supply a digital code with the trade, giving people that last version digitally or something.
I agree. I'm not sure why Image decided this, and this is very clearly Image Comics' decision. This is, again, going back to my conversation with Landry at Emerald City last year. He talked about that, and he referred to it in other interviews as well. But he told me too that be sure to get the alternate, the variant copy, because it's not going to be in the trade. And he told me it was Image Comics' decision not to do that for some reason. Now, to be fair, Landry Jones and maybe Drake, I'm not sure who makes these kinds of decisions for this book, but they did briefly flirt with the idea of printing only one version. That's not the right way to put this.
Only one cover.
Having one cover, one number 8 issue, but some of the printed issues would have the alternate ending and some would not. Some would have, so you could potentially get one ending or the other.
Right.
And then it was Image Comics who said, no, let's not do that. Let's put out a variant version.
I can see why they would like that idea artistically, but it would drive fans insane.
Yeah, and they knew that too. They knew it wouldn't be fair, and it would probably enrage a few people.
But artistically, it might be kind of pleasing when you're playing metafictionally with things to say there's just 2 different endings out there, and who knows which ending you'll get, just as who knows what ending you'll get in our metafictional world. Exactly.
So, but yeah, I agree with you. Image should have offered a digital download code for that alternate ending.
I can see why it would be confusing to print these side by side, because of the changes start in the middle of the issue and are so subtle at first. But I think a free digital download would kind of solve that. It would give you access to a different version. Now,
last time I checked, at this point, Comixology was offering both versions of number 8 as a bundle, so you could get both versions at a discounted price.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well,
so you have to search for that, I think.
When I first looked, you had to buy them separately, and I just, since I prefer to own a physical copy, I didn't want to pay full price for what I thought was just 3 extra pages.
Yeah. Like I said, I could be wrong about that, but the last time I checked, it was that way.
Yeah. Now, people talk about rarity in comics. This is going to be a real rarity then. It's never going to be reprinted. And who knows how many copies of the alternate version were printed. But since it's not Harley Quinn or whatever, it probably won't ever go up in price that much anyway.
Well, see, that exactly right.
I ordered it from mycomicshop.com, I believe. Or maybe I did it from, who did I do it from? Yeah, mycomicshop.com, and I think they pretty much charged me cover price.
Mm-hmm. Well, this comic is such a joy. It was such a joy to me. It was even more so having to reread it because I was going to talk with you about it. On top of that, I'm talking about it with you, someone who also read it and is a fan. And it's just I just think it's one of the better superhero stories that I've read in the last, I don't know, few decades.
Right.
Well constructed.
If I were to edit a comic book, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
you continue your thoughts. Sorry, I was jumping over all over.
It's just well constructed, beautifully rendered by Jones and Drake. Like I said, I'm repeating myself, but the metafictional qualities, the focus on the teen superheroes, it's just a wonderful, in some ways, very high concept. In other ways, not so much, but it's still a wonderful book, a superhero book. It's a great book. People should read this. This is a book that people should look back on in 10 years and go, yeah, that was a good book. Like people do with oh gosh, name something, Damian. You look back on Crisis or the
Kingdom Come,
or Daredevil, Dark Knight, all of those things. I think this is up there with those.
Well, so when you do a book on that level with the big characters, you're going to get much more of a buzz than when you make up all your own characters. Mm-hmm. Although I kind of liked it better. I enjoyed them having their whole universe that they made up. So if I were an editor, I would say, I want this team, and what do they have next up their sleeve, and how can we help them to get it out in a timely manner and get it a lot of promotion, because there's definitely something special going on here, and we need to market that.
Yeah. Image would be crazy not to go forward with a revisitation or a restoration, an apocatastasis, if you will, of this world. But even if they never go back to this world, this team of Walker, Jones, and Drake is just wonderful. And I will pretty much buy, if not just commit to buying anything that they do from now on.
Have you tracked down any more of their work? We were talking about, have we both read the Supergirl in junior high school book they did? Yeah,
the Supergirl and the Cosmic Adventures in the 8th grade, I think is the subtitle. Yeah, I did read that. I did ask the question, I wanted to make sure I clear this up, if Rusty Drake did the colors, and he did not on that. It was just Walker and Jones working on that. They also worked together on, I mentioned this before, but on some Batman Brave and the Bold issues, which I plan to get. And I know, having read some recent interviews with Walker, I think Jones too, they're working on some stuff. They're together. They got some things. In fact, today I was looking on Twitter, and Walker is at some convention. It's a convention I'm not familiar with, so I don't remember the name of it now. But he was on a panel, and he made some comment about something that he's working on that he could not yet announce.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know if that's working with Jones and Drake, but either way, I'll be paying attention to it.
Well, he was after Charles Soule left Red Lanterns. I left Red Lanterns, but I think that Landry Walker was the writer who followed him. So I feel like maybe I should dig up those back issues now.
Yes, that's very true, and he did, and I bought them from him at that Emerald City show, and so I need to go back and read those as well.
I kind of wonder if that might have been one of those situations where often your hands are tied. They know they're canceling the book already when they put you on it, and they just want you to be part of some crossover or something.
Yeah,
but I'll still take a look at it now. Yeah. I remember in that JK's Happy Hour was the name of that podcast we couldn't remember before, which you did link to, so that's great. I think you linked to it on your show notes of the previous podcast.
Yes, for the audio version.
There they said they do a lot of other work together that's more like design work or other behind the scenes kind of stuff that comic fans wouldn't see, like maybe for film or toy companies or something. I can't remember what.
Yeah, I think Jones is doing stuff like that. Walker, yeah, you're right. Both of them were. I don't know that they were working together, but they were definitely doing some stuff, some conceptual stuff for toys or games or something like that. But yeah.
So I really want some editors out there to say, these are the guys we've got to get. Let's see what we can do to get them and let them do their thing.
But yes, my main vote, however, would be, let's come back to Danger Club's world and do something. Whether it's the Micro Tokyo focused story or more Silver Agey type stuff, or even like they were joking about doing a funny animal version of these characters. I don't care. Bring it on. I will buy it.
Now that we've gone through the whole thing and gotten to the end, I have mixed feelings on that. It's a little bit like doing Before Watchmen or whatever.
Maybe.
They kind of wrapped things up so much.
Yeah, but see,
there are so many pockets you would like to explore.
yes. I don't know. While Watchmen, I think works as a novel in the sense that it has a definite beginning, middle, and end. And before Watchmen was kind of playing around with that, pushing that concept a little bit, and not so successfully for the most part. But I don't know. I feel like there's so much to this world that could be explored, even though we had a resolution to that particular story. But there's so many other stories and characters that they could focus on and do comics about.
I guess. Would those ones not have the metafictional context as this does? I mean, I don't know.
It's a mixed bag, right? You want that because you like it, at least in my case, but at the same time, you're just retreading what we already had, right? So they have to do something different. Maybe I'm going to talk myself out of it now.
I mean, it depends what ideas they have. It just seems a dangerous thing.
No pun intended.
Micro
right?
Tokyo especially appeals to me at this point, and they did mention that as a possibility. So
all righty.
They may be the only ones who listen to this to the end anyway. So I hope they're taking our advice, whatever our confused advice is.
Yes. That'd be awesome, wouldn't
it? They retweeted you and stuff, right?
Yeah. But if they have actually absorbed the content is another matter. Speaking of such, Damian, I think it's time that we got out of here. Are there any other parting thoughts you would like to impart to our audience about Danger Club?
I guess just as you've said, go out and get those trades or something. You're in for a treat. Yeah, and find the alternate ending if you can.
Yep, well said.
I feel like we've covered everything.
Yep, I think we have in great detail. But it was vastly enjoyable.
Let me end with that as my
yes. I was just going to say the same thing. It's been wonderful talking with you, Damon. Thank you so much for agreeing to doing this. Thank you so much for taking the hours out of your days to do this with me. I very much appreciate it, and extend my thank you and appreciation to your family as well.
Okay.
Damian, why don't you remind the fine folks out there where they can find your content that you create out on the interwebs?
You go to YouTube and look up the channel Sleepy Reader 666, and there's new little vloggy kinds of things every few days, depending on how busy I am, and a huge backlog you can watch if you want. Very good. And if you would like to, you can leave comments by going to the website, longboxreview.com, where this video and audio will be posted. Other than that, you can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can also contact me on Twitter at longboxreview. And Damian, you're on Twitter as well at sleepyreader666. 66, yeah. So you can get a hold of him as well. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. Such a great comic. Do what Damian said. Go buy it. Go read it. Go enjoy it. Bye-bye, folks.